I'm just checking the chat if there's any messages for me. Nothing. All right, cool. Let's kick things off. All right, I'm going to share my whiteboard with you, and just let me know if you can't see it or if anything is unclear. So I'm showing a table, and on the first column it says toiletry items, and amongst those items is soap, deodorant, and toothpaste. All right, so if anyone can't see it, please do let me know. I'm just going to make the assumption that you can't see it. All right, so back to the whiteboard. So index numbers, what it's all about. You must have heard of something. Okay, well, everyone's heard of inflation. All right, it's how the price of goods and just basic living expenses increases over time. Okay, it basically eats away your money. So in other words, 100 Rand could get you a lot more 20 years ago versus now, and that's inflation. So how do we measure inflation? Well, inflation is basically using index numbers, and that's what you're going to be covering today. It's how you actually measure a change in something relative to a past period. So if any of you have heard of the consumer price index, that's generally used as an indicator for measuring inflation for price or basket of goods for a general household over time. Okay, so let's say the consumer price index is 110%. So what that means is that the same price of goods has increased by 10%. Now, generally, you would need to know what are you comparing it to. So like if we had to measure the CPI now, then say it is 110%, and that means it increased by 10%. But from what period did it increase by 10%? Was it the year 2000? Was it the year 2010? And that's what the base period is. You would have to know what you're comparing it to. And the benchmark is what you're comparing it to. That period is known as the base period. So in this table, what you have here, and I'm just gonna draw your attention to what I'm going to be underlining here in blue. I only want you to focus on these columns for now. Okay, what I'm underlining with blue. Let's forget the rest on the right. Just focus on these 4 columns. Should I say 5? So what you're given here is the question will tell you what the base year is. And in this question, the base year is 2010. And the current year is 2018. All right. So just keep in mind, it doesn't always have to work in years. Sometimes your base period can be 5 months ago, and your current period would be this month. So your base period could be January this year, and your current period would be July, where we are now. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a year-on-year comparison. It can be a month-on-month. Just keep that in mind, but the question will always stipulate that. So in this example, though, I'm comparing years, but the principle is exactly the same as if you were comparing months apart. Okay, so now your base year is 2010, and your current year is 2018. And what you've given here, I'm just going to draw your attention to this column here, and you'll see there's a label here, P naught. Okay, P just means price, and the naught represents the base year. So whenever you see the 1 next to P, that means the current year, and when you see 0, that means it's the base year. That's what the 0 and the 1 represents. In the same light, in this column, it'll be quantity. That's why you're seeing Q there. You're seeing the Q in this column, and Q naught, that's the quantity for the base year. And then the quantity for the current year would be Q1. So soap, the price of soap in 2010 was 195. And in the current year, the price has now increased to 2 Rand 10 cents. Okay. The quantity of soap used in 2010 was 37, and the quantity of soap used in 2018 is now 40. Okay. Now, don't always assume that prices will increase for all items. Okay, you can have cases where the price decreased. You can also have cases where the quantity decreased. All right. So don't make the assumption that everything is always going to be higher in your current period compared to your base year. All right, so let's look at a typical kind of question you'll get for this section. What you could get asked to calculate is the price relative. Okay, so I'm just going to write that down. So you're asked to work out the price relative of one of these items. And let's use soap as an example. Okay, so the question says, what is the price relative? Price relative of soap. Okay, so you're asked to work out that. Okay, so what that means is you're just trying to determine how has the price of soap changed from 2010 to 2018. So what you want to work out is the price of soap in the current year, so of soap, and we want to divide it by the price of soap in the current year, sorry, in the base year. And we multiply that by 100%. So we want that answer to be as a percent. And P1, the price of soap in the current year, P1, if you look at the table, it's showing you that P1 for soap is 210 cents. So the numerator is 210 cents. And the denominator, which is the price of soap in the base year, which is 195. 1.95 and 100%. So whenever we want to work out a change relative to something, we divide it. Okay, we always divide it by the period before or the past period, and we multiply by 100%. So if you work this out, you'll get a value of, as you know, it is 107.7%. Okay, now for a lot of you, you'll be able to just see that the value is greater than 100, so it means it increased. So just remember that if it's greater than 100, it increased. If it's less than 100, it decreased. But if you're still not comfortable with that, then all you need to do is always subtract 100% from it, and what you're left with will tell you whether it increased or decreased. So in other words, if I subtract 100 from this, okay, so the 107.7% minus 100%, it'll leave you with 7.7%. And because that number is positive, that means it increased. You don't have to do the step here. You don't have to. It's up to you. But it is handy because sometimes the numbers aren't as easy to pick up whether it's an increase or decrease and to work out what that increase is. And I'll show you with an example later on. Okay, so that means it increased. So when you work out these kind of problems, this is what you expected to work out. You expect it to work out the price relative, and then you must interpret it in terms of words. Okay, you must interpret it so to show that you understand what these numbers mean. So in the context of this problem, what we're saying is the price of soap has increased by 7.7%. And you must say between which periods. So you would say from 2010 to 2018. This is what you're expected to answer for your interpretation. You've got to show whether it increased or decreased, show how much it changed by, and what period has it changed by. These are the three things you must cover in your interpretation. All right, let me just check the chat if there's any questions. Everything's clear. All good. Okay, I'm just going to assume.
Hi, Darul Azad.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm doing good, man. I just wanted to confirm with you that we are using the, we are on a chapter 15.
Chapter. Okay, let me just check my textbook. I know it's Learning Unit 2. I didn't memorize the chapters, but it's in the pacer if you really want to confirm it. But I got my textbook here, so just give me a minute and I'll tell you.
Okay.
Learning Unit. No, index numbers is chapter 14. If you're using the 5th edition of your textbook.
The 5th edition. Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
It's
I'll
index
check
numbers.
that. Thank you so much.
No problem. Hey, all right, let's get back to the whiteboard. Okay, so that's the price relative of soap. In the same light, you can also get asked about quantity. All right, so let's look at an example of quantity. So I'm just gonna erase this. When I'm doing this, just to point out, I have made the assignment available on ARC, but you can also get it from the portal. So assignment 1 is available. I don't think assignment 2 is available as yet. So if you want to download it and start working through it, it's up to you. But just to note that it is available. Okay. Okay. All right. Back to the next question. So now let's say they ask you to work out the quantity relative of deodorant. Right? So the quantity, I'm just going to write QTY as a short form for quantity because I'm lazy. The quantity relative of deodorant. All right, so say we need to work that out. So then we'll look at deodorant. It's in this row here. And now we're only going to look at quantity. So we want to know how quantity has changed relative to the base here. So we're going to look at Q1 for deodorant divided by Q naught of deodorant times 100%. And quantity for deodorant in the current year, Q1, is 18. And the quantity for deodorant in the base year is 24. Okay, so we go down Q naught column, and where it crosses deodorant, we'll have the 24 there. So it's 24 multiplied by 100%. Right, and that'll give us a value of 75%. Okay, now you can see that the value is less than 100. Okay, so this indicates that it decreased. So if we want to be kind of more technical and pedantic about it, let's just subtract 100 to be safe. So we'll say 75% minus 100%, you are left with minus 25%. That the minus just means it decreased. All right, so how we would interpret this is we would say the quantity of deodorant has decreased by 25% from 2010. Sorry, my handwriting is terrible. I'm hoping you kind of understand it. From 2010 to 2018. Yeah, right. To 2018. So once again, you indicated that it decreased. You showed how much it decreased by and what period that changed by. So these are the three main things you need to have in your interpretation. All right, so that's price relative and quantity relative. Okay, now so far what we've done is we've looked at unweighted indices. And what I mean by unweighted indices is that we looked at quantity and price in isolation. So for example, for this example, we only looked at quantity. There's no price that's taken into account in the calculation. And previously, when we did the price relative for soap, we only looked at price of soap. There was no quantity taken into account. But for weighted indices, which is what we're going to do now, you would take both of these measures into account. All right, so let me clear the board and I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. Please, if there's any questions, yeah, just let me know. I will check the chat in a second. Okay, so one of the examples of a weighted index, which you would very likely be assessed on, is the last Perez price index. So we'll look at this one here. The formula is given to you, so you're not expected to memorize it, okay? You just need to know how to use it. So the formula is given to you. So let's say you're asked to work out the last Perez price index, all right? So I'm gonna write it down, explain what it's all about. So you have the last Perez price index. So even though it's a price index, if you look at the formula, quantity is in it, right? So you can see Q is in it, all right? So why would we want to include quantity if we're working out the price index? And the reason we do that is because sometimes the quantity can downweight something. And what I mean by that is, okay, let's look at an example, right? Let's say you got these 3 items: soap, deodorant, and toothpaste, right? So this is just 3 items. Now, I'll write it out: soap, deodorant, okay, and toothpaste. All right, now let's say in a typical household, quantity for soap, the quantity will be quite high, all right? So quantity also known as QTY. All right, let's say it's in a year, the amount of soap that you use is, I'm just making up a number here, let's say 50, okay? All right, deodorant, let's say it's a small number. Deodorant is say 7, okay? And toothpaste would also be quite large. Let's go with 40. Now, you don't want, when you're working out the price of a basket of goods relative to a different period, you wouldn't want deodorant to influence that total price of the basket too much because the quantity is so small, right? So let's say the price, right? The price for soap is, for this example I'm making here, let's say it's 2 Rand. But deodorant is expensive, right? Make up a high number here. Say it's about 75 Rand. And the toothpaste is quite cheap. It's about 8 Rand. Now you can see, even though the quantity is so small, the price of deodorant will drive the overall price up because the price is so high. But you don't want that because it should be relative to how much of it you use, okay? So that's why quantity comes into account for the calculation. Even though we're focusing on the price change, we don't want deodorant to influence it too much because there's very little of it used for the year. Okay, so that's why in the formula you would see the quantity taken into account. Okay, does that make sense, everyone? If there's any questions, just let me know. Okay, cool. All right, let's get back to the board. All right, so all we're going to do now is we're going to use the formula, right? So what I just spoke about now is just kind of to give you an understanding of why the quantity is taken into account. You won't be tested on that. It's just out of interest. Okay, so everything that I'm raising now is just out of interest. But now, this is what you'll be expected to work out. So the question is, work out the last price index. All right, and all we need to do is follow this formula, which is given to us. All right, now, this is where I'm going to use a different color here. These columns, these additional 4 columns that I have are going to come into effect. Okay, now these columns that I have in green, you'd be expected to work them out. So everything that's in blue, okay, on the left, that's given to you in the question. You won't be given as totals, but it's easy to work with the totals, okay? So these totals here, it's very easy to work out. I'm just going to circle it. You're just adding up the columns. So for instance, to get this total here of 2289, all you're doing is you're adding 195, 1465, and 629. You're adding all of them up and you get this total of 2289. You do the same thing for each column. And the number that you see in the total row is just the total for each column. Now, these 4 columns that I'm drawing your attention to here, green, these you're expected to work out. Now, what you do here is you list all the combinations of price and quantity. All right, so for instance, in this first column here that you see here, you're pairing P1 with Q0. So P1 here with Q0, which is here. You're pairing these two up. And what that means is when you have P1 Q0, all that means is you're taking the price and you're multiplying it by the quantity. In other words, you're multiplying the P1 column with the Q0 column. So let's just look at this first value here. All right, I'm going to focus on this column here, P1 Q0. All right, how I got that 7770 is I'm taking P1, which is here, for this row, which is 210. So 210 times Q0, which is 37 for that row, times 37. And if you do that, you get a value of 7770, which is how I get this value here. All right, and then you do the same thing for the next row. Okay, you multiply each respective column to get the value in the P1 Q0. So the next one would be 24 times 1595, and you're left with 382.80. And you do the same thing for the last row. All right, so you just follow it in a very systematic way. So that's your P1 Q0. The next arrangement is P0 with Q0. Now you don't have to follow the order that I've done it. You could do it in your own order. The important thing is that you do have these 4 columns here. All right, you must have these 4 columns though, but you could have them arranged differently. So the next one you're going to work out is P0 Q0. All right, then you're going to do P1 Q1, and lastly you're going to do P0 Q1. So you're always just arranging. You have different arrangements of P and Q. All right, so there's the 1, there's the 2, 3, and the 4th one. So the last column, you got P0 Q0 Q1. So now you're multiplying the P0 column, which is here, with the Q1 column here, and that's how you get the values. You get the values for each row, and then finally you get the total for each of those columns. All right, so I'm just going to pause there for a second. I know it probably doesn't make sense why you're doing it, but I just need you to understand how to do it. I'll explain why you're doing it in a second. But what is important is that you understand how to do it. So if any of you are not sure how to get these 4 columns that I've just shown you here, that's underlined in green, I'm just going to check the chat. Please let me know and I'll explain it again. But it's vitally important that you understand how to create those columns. Everyone good, or anyone needs to go over that again?
Sorry, sir. Can you please just quickly go over it again?
No problem. Okay, I'll just choose a column, right? Let's do this column here. Okay, I'm gonna get this column called P0 Q0. Now what that means is when you have it listed as P0 Q0, all that means is that there's a multiplication in between it. That means it's P0 times Q0. All right. Now if you look at the first row for soap, okay, the first row which is for soap, P0 value for soap is 195. It's 195, and the Q0 value for soap is 37. So that's the Q0 column. So it's 37. So it's 195 times 37, and if you work that out, it gives you a value of 72 Rand 15. All right, so that's soap, and this will give you the 72.15. Oops, my bad. 15. All right, let's do the same thing for deodorants, and I think you might get the hang of it, but just let me know. We do the same thing for deodorants. Remember, we're only interested in this column now. So the P0 for deodorant is 1465 times Q0 for deodorant is 24. And that'll give you a value of 351 and 60 cents. And 60. So that's how you get this P0, Q0 column. Does that make sense? And you do the same thing for toothpaste. Just checking. Does that make sense? Cool, Vanessa. All right. So then you do the exact same thing for the other columns. I just showed you how to do it for P0, Q0, but you do the exact same thing. If you wanted the P1, Q1 column, then you are doing P1 times the Q1 value. All right. So you do that for each of these columns. Okay. All right. Hope that makes sense, but please, I can happily go over that again. All good? Okay. All right. Okay. So, like I said, I know I just told you to create those columns, but now I'm going to explain to you why you do it. All right. Okay. All right. Almost there. I'm going to go back to blue. Okay. All right. Now, we're working out the last price index. Now, if you look at the formula for the last price index, right here, this formula here, it is sum. That's what the sigma means. P1 times Q0 all over sum P0 times Q0 times 100%. All right. Now this, remember, the sigma means sum. All right. So that means, let's just look at the numerator. Okay, so I'm just going to draw your attention to the numerator. This sum here of P1 Q0. That means you look at the P1 Q0 column, which you've already done. Right? This is why you created it. You created that P1 Q0 column. And this sum means what is the total of that column? And you've worked that out already. It's here. That's it. So the numerator is this value here. 554, 554.86. And then the denominator, what do you think the denominator is? Could you put that in the chat? If you look at the table, I've got all the totals here. So it's just a matter of matching that column with this. So what do you think the denominator is? This value in the bottom of the division sign. I'll give you a second to put that in the chat. Very good. Excellent. That's it. It is this value here. That's the denominator, 511.81. Okay, and then times 100%. If you work this out, you get a value of 108.41%. 108.41%. Okay, so we can subtract 100 from it, and you're left with 8.41%. Right, so we know it increased. We increased by 8.41%. But this is not the interpretation you need to write down. Okay, so I'm just writing this here as a note. This is how you interpret it. Okay, so I'm going to write the proper interpretation, which you need to get used to. All right, so I'm going to erase this, and I'll show you what to write when you're interpreting the last price index. Okay, now if you look at the formula, all right, let's look at the formula. Let me just draw your attention to this formula for the last price index. Yeah. This is the price index, so we vary the price. So that means the price in the top is going to be different from the price in the bottom. However, if you look at the Q value, both the numerator and the denominator has Q naught. Okay, it's the same quantity. So what that means is that you've held the quantity in the base here, because that's what Q naught is. Q naught is the quantity in the base here. The formula is saying you're holding the quantity in the base year constant because it's the same in both the numerator and the denominator. So that's what you would say when you're interpreting this question. Okay, you would say keeping or holding, it's the same thing, keeping the quantity in, now remember, Q naught is the base year. Now I could say base year, right? But when you're getting tested and examined, we want to know that you can identify what the base year is. So the base year is 2010. So instead of saying base year, I'm going to say 2010 instead. So keeping the quantity in 2010 constant, right? The price, okay, increased by 8.41% from 2010 to 2018. That's how you interpret it. Okay, so there's three things you've covered here. Actually, there's four things now. Four. You're saying what you're keeping constant, and it's the quantity in 2010. That's one. You're showing that you can identify that it increased. You're showing how much it increased by and what period it has changed by. So these are the four things you need to have in your interpretation. Okay. Does everyone understand that? Any questions on this? Yeah.
How many marks in a test would this question be?
I'd say between 5 and 7, between 5 and 7. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, that all done. So I'm checking the question here. P1, Q1. So Taylor, yeah, so you need the totals. So if you look at the formulas here, the formulas require the totals, which is why you're working out these totals in the bottom. Yeah. Okay. So that's the Lasper's price index. Now we're going to do the Posh price index. It is a very similar principle. Okay. You've already done most of the work by creating those extra 4 columns. So now it's just a matter of finding the values to substitute in that formula. All right. Now instead of Lasper's, we're going to work out Posh. Right, so Posh price index. Now we're going to be using this formula. You don't need to memorize it, you just need to know how to use it. Okay, now, you look at the numerator for this one, so I'll write out the formula just a bit bigger. So you got sum P1, Q1, all over sum P0, Q1, times 100%. Now you've done all the hard work by creating these 4 columns. So it's just a matter of finding the totals that match to the numerator and the denominator. So for the numerator, it's a sum P1, Q1. So it's this value here, 478.94. 478.94 all over the denominator, which is the sum of P0, Q1. So P0, Q1, that will be the last column here, 442.34 times 100%. You work this out, you get a value of 108.27%. All right. And because it's greater than 100, we can see that it increased by 8.2%. So I'm just going to write up arrow here as a note, 8.27%. All right, so now let's do the interpretation. Okay, so firstly, let me check the chat. Everyone okay with this? Any questions on the calculation? Good. Cool. All right, let's do the interpretation. Okay, so basically for all this working, this calculation, you probably get about, let's say, 4 marks. The interpretation will carry around 3 marks, so a total of 7. It's roughly, it will be between 5 and 7, but it's, yeah, you just work on that range. Okay, all right. Now, if you look at the formula, you can see for the Posh price index, your price is different, but you're keeping the quantity the same. And the quantity that you're keeping the same is Q1. So Q1 is the constant factor here. Right? So Q1 is constant. And we know that Q1 is the quantity in 2018. So we would say keeping the quantity in 2018 constant. Okay. The price, I would just add a little more detail. The price of toiletry items, because that's what we're looking at, right? So the price of toiletry items increased by this 8.27% from 2010 to 2018. That's it. That's your interpretation. Okay. Just let me know if that's, I'm just checking the chat if there's any questions. All right, all good. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do for this session is I'm going to do a Lasperus quantity index. Okay, so I just want you to focus on this one. This one's probably the trickiest. So I know I saved the worst for the last, but I think if you understood all of this, this is not going to be very difficult.
Sorry,
Right.
man. I have a question.
Go
Do you
for it.
get the formulas in the tests, or the formula something we should memorize?
No, it's provided to you in a formula sheet.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Okay. You could get asked for, let's say, the Lasperus or Posh, but in this example, I'm only going to do the Lasperus. Okay. Let's say you asked to work with the Lasperus quantity index. You could get asked this. Quantity. Okay. Now I know I said the formulas are given to you, but the formulas for the price index are given to you, not quantity, which is why I'm doing this now. I'm doing this in the end. And for this one, you'd have to derive it. But the thing is, you just have to tweak these formulas to get it. Okay. So the Lasperus quantity index, let's look at the Lasperus price index formula. So the price index for Lasperus, this is given to us. Right, this is sum P1 Q0 all over sum P0 Q0. All right, 100% times 100%. Now, if you look at the price index, you have to vary the price. Okay, because you're working at the price index, you're trying to determine how the price has changed. So I'm just going to circle this in green here. Okay, you circle in green because we're working at the price index, we have to vary the price. Okay, now for the quantity index, In the same way, if you're working out the quantity index, you would have to vary the quantity instead, right? So for the quantity index, it's going to be, let me just draw a line here so separate this. You're going to vary the quantity. So in the numerator, you're going to have Q1 on the top, because you're always comparing current period to the bottom period, so the base period. Some Q0, right? Now the question is, what price do we use? So because you worked out the quantity index, you vary the price, hence why you got Q1 on top, Q0 on the bottom. But you need to fix the price now. Since you're working out the quantity index, you need to fix the price. But which price do you use? Now, the last Perez price index, if you look at the price index, you're keeping the quantity in the base period constant. And that's the whole difference between last Perez and Posh. Last Perez, you always keep the base period constant, whereas Posh, you can see you keep the Q1 constant. So you keep the current period constant, which is why I've written it here. So that's your takeaway from this, all right? Last Perez, you keep the base constant, whereas Posh, you keep the current constant. So if we are working out the last Perez quantity index, you'd keep the price in the base period constant. So it'll be P0, yeah? And it'll be P0 here. All right, and then times 100%. That's how you get the formula. Any questions here? Do you want me to explain that again, or is everyone okay with that? How I derive that formula? Okay, fantastic. Great. So that's, you're given the price index formula. If you are asked for, say, last Perez quantity index or Posh quantity index, all you're going to do is switch around your P's and your Q's, all right? Actually, if that makes it easy for you, you could actually just do that. So for instance, if you want the Posh, if you want the we did last Perez, all right? If you want the last Perez quantity index, you can see you're just switching the letters around. You're keeping the numbers the same, all right? So you make the P's the Q's and the Q's the P, basically, all right? But whichever method works for you, as long as you understand last Perez, you keep the base period constant. Posh, you keep the current period constant. All right. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover for this evening. I'm going to leave just the floor open to you if you have any questions on anything. But I hope you understood the content today. All right,
Sir, not exactly about what we did today, but just in general, how do students like handle this module? Like, do they usually like excel at it, or is it just like 50-50?
I don't have the I don't have the stats for it, but I definitely don't see it's 50-50. I can't compare it to the other modules because I don't teach the other modules, but I can tell you one thing that I have observed, and that's for certain. The students that work consistently with it, and if you cram towards the exam, they don't do very well. This is one of those courses you have to just work consistently, because it isn't about trying to swat something off or learn something off. Once you understand the concept and the method, it would stick with you towards the exam. So you just have to work through problems. The amount of revision problems that I've made available, if you look through the PACER, even the ICE task, if you just follow that and you work through it, you should be fine. If you're struggling to understand the question, you have to let me know. And if I have to leave it to you, because I won't know what you don't understand. You got to let me know. You got to give me feedback. And then I can help you through that. When students worked consistently through this course, they've done well. They've not just passed, they've got a very good mark. So that's kind of the trick to it. It's just work consistently. Don't cram. Don't leave things for last minute. Those that haven't done very well. I think that's the only advice I can kind of give you. I hope that helps. And like a good thing to actually do is like every week when I do the session, I understand not every student is going to make the synchronous sessions, but catch up on the recording and go through what I've done. What is handy, I would recommend is work through what I've just done in the session. Don't look at the answers that I've done. Look at the problem. Look what I've asked, what question I've asked in this session, and then you try and work it out. And then check whether your answer corresponds to what I've done in this session. That's a very good way to consolidate your learning or your understanding. Ethan? You have your hand up?
Sorry, my mic was muted. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
How are you doing tonight, Daryl?
Good. I'm having a good evening. And you?
Good, yeah. Basically, I just wanted to ask, unfortunately, I was only able to hop on at around like past. So I missed a little bit of it, but I just wanted to check. I want to ask two questions. The first one is there anywhere specific in the book that we went through today, so that I can go back and go through it with the recording?
Ethan, what is the question about the book? Sorry, I missed that part about the book.
Oh, sorry. Was there a specific part in the book, like pages,
No.
that you went through today?
No. I referred mainly to the whiteboard. Whatever
So
I've shown on screen, that's it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I also wanted to check if there's a WhatsApp group or something like that for the class.
I don't have a WhatsApp group. The students generally have one.
Yeah.
If there's someone that is an admin that has a group, you're welcome to give me the details and I can send the link and an announcement so the entire class can. So Ryan,
Okay.
I think you've put it there. So what I'll do, Ryan, is
Thank you.
copy this and I'm going to make an announcement and then people can join it via that. Okay. So please, any questions, especially about content, and I welcome questions about the content because it kind of shows that you're working through it. Please just send me an email and I will get back to you. Right? Whatever you're struggling to understand, let me know. Okay. Any other questions? If not, then that's it for this evening, everyone. I will make the recording available maybe by tomorrow. I'll make an announcement via it. If you can't access it, if you have any problems, accessing the recording, because I am making it available on YouTube now. But if you are, let me know. All right. With that, I will leave you and have a great evening, everyone. Chat soon. All the best.
Thank you.